Take your seats, we'll get started, because I'm sure people have a busy evening ahead. Welcome everybody. For those who don't know me, my name's Ian Allinson. I'm the chair of the Fujitsu Northwest Unite branch that's hosting this Hustings. If people haven't, it would be good if you'd turn your phones off so that we don't get any interruptions.
Any texts from Len?
Telling us what to think. I mean, just to explain, Mark, our branch secretary, wrote to both candidates, Jerry and Len, back on the 26th of February, proposing the hustings, proposing tonight as the date, but making clear we'd change the date if that was necessary to accommodate the candidates. We didn't get a reply from Len, though Jerry confirmed. So Mark wrote again to Len on the 5th of March saying, well, we'd now gone ahead and made the booking for the event, and it would be great if he could confirm he was coming. We still haven't heard from Len, so there is a picture of him here, if that helps. But maybe he'll turn up during the meeting, who knows. But before we get into the main part of the meeting, there's a number of us here from the Fujitsu branch. And today's been the funeral for one of our reps who was killed on the way to work last week after 45 years working in the company and over 40 years as a union rep. So I'd like to just briefly ask everybody just stand for a moment. I remember Robert Williams, who we all knew as Wilf, who made a fantastic contribution to the union. Thanks very much, everybody. What we do have is Jerry Hicks, and welcome to Jerry. So what I'm going to do is ask Jerry to speak for a little while, maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and then we can open it up for some questions and discussions. I should mention, in case you hadn't spotted, we are being filmed by a couple of different people, so if anybody doesn't want to be filmed, it would be very helpful if you could let them both know, and we'll try and make sure that you don't appear anywhere you shouldn't. So I'll hand over to Jerry.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think in the interests of democracy, that we do need to toss a coin to see who speaks first, rather than simply assume that I'm number one. I think that might be April the 13th. On a serious note, this is the Friends Meeting House. I hope I'm amongst friends. It's certainly a meeting, and if you were the Queen, this building may well resemble one of your homes. The last time I was in Manchester, actually, it was for a construction meeting. It was a collection of sparks. They were involved in a dispute. It was national terms and conditions. 8 of the major companies who were parties to this unilaterally decided that they would remove themselves. And the sparks themselves, and I kid you not, it was just with 2 or 3 phone calls, said, look, this is a dilemma for us. What are we going to do about it? And it was then a venue in London at the time. Well, we need to meet. We need to discuss. We need to decide. And we need to do something. And the phone calls became the texts, which clearly the room that was originally booked above a pub was not big enough. And so they booked another room, which after a few days was not big enough. And then within 10 days that shook the world, which I think is the title of another book, 500 electricians, Unite members, assembled in a very hot Saturday afternoon in August in London, in Conway Hall. A stone's throw away, in fact, from our union's head office. But you know, the 2 officials that did turn up, and I'm not anti-official, let me make this point right now. I'm for the election of officials where we decide who represents us, rather than appointments, so that the elected officials, by Fujitsu workers, by finance workers, or the construction workers, are accessible and accountable to them. But the two officials that did come from Holborn didn't think to bring one recruitment form, didn't really realise that the meeting was going to be so big. And I excuse them for that, because many people didn't realise how big it was. But this was something which was happening to people, and you needed an immediate response. And the reason I've started with this is they took matters into their own hands, because the laws, the ballots, the procedures, the hoops, the hurdles are there to shackle us. They're designed to dissuade us, to make the time so consuming that sometimes the disputes are over or ended, or you've given up or given in. But it means that if the union always and every single time stays within the law, the anti-union laws, as we describe them, brought in by Thatcher. But the irony is, 13 years, 3 terms of Labour, they actually, the majority of the years of the anti-union years were Labour anti-union laws. If you make your decision to always stay within the law, then you will not meet, decide and do. You will not be able to react with the immediacy that our electricians did. And it was on that day in London in August, they did decide that a course of action was needed. They elected themselves a committee. You will do that. You'll recognise these procedures in work, and you elect your committee, you elect your reps, and so on, until you get an hour union, and then you don't elect your officials. But I've probably said that twice now, and twice is enough for anyone on a Friday night. But the course of action was to take the fight to the employer, because the employer would give them a deadline in 6 weeks' time, return to work under these new conditions. New, I'm old enough to remember, you're not, Ian, when new meant something good. You were going to get a new bike or a new something. Yay! Now if you hear the words new from the government or employers, it means worse. This change that they tell you will mean a cut. And they were given 6 weeks. If you turn up for the new conditions, you accepted. If you didn't, you were sacked. But they took it on. And they took the fight to the employers, which is what you need to do when the occasion arises. I can tell you that dispute, I was actually elected. This was 2011. I was elected to the organising campaign, as it were, the committee, and it was a proud moment. I was the only person, non-construction, non-electrical, to be elected. But I was elected to that committee to organise this campaign, which stopped the traffic and went to sites and did what we had to do. It was direct action, civil disobedience, which actually the TUC once said. And also Lemon McCluskey, who we may want to mention that when he has his 10 minutes. Civil disobedience, you know, is not a catchphrase. It is an action. And it's what these electricians did, not because they necessarily wanted to, but it was the way that they decided, after discussion, was the course of action which best protected them and gave them the chance of victory. It went on for about 18 months. The union did catch up. We're pleased that they did, but it took them 12 months. Many disputes go down to defeat within that period. But the electricians won. One by one, the 8 became 7, became 6, as it became too much for them, the disputes, the protests at hotels and the golf courses and the sites. And I've started with that one, and I've made so much emphasis on that one, because for me, it reflects the period that we're in. I'm in the biggest union in the country, 1.5 million. It's potentially the most powerful union in the country. Probably, absolutely actually, more powerful than all the other unions. We actually have people in the power industry. These lights are only on because of our members. This building is only constructed because of our members. And if you fall ill, you go to the hospital and you will be then reliant upon our members in pathology and blood transfusion and the porters, and you know these things. So we have the potential. And if I'm in the biggest union in the country, if we have potentially the most powerful, why do I feel so vulnerable? Why do I feel that on April the 1st, the cuts will affect me equally, if not more than anyone else? I'm unemployed. And indeed, if I had a spare room, I dare say I'd had some benefits cut. The Queen must be really worried with the spare rooms that she has on all the taxpayers' benefits she gets. Just think of the empty rooms in Balmoral, Buckingham Palace and Sandringham in Windsor. But the point is, I do feel vulnerable because I say that we don't recognise the opportunities, we don't maximise the potential, but we can do. We must do. We ought to. We're in a period of crisis. And you know, it's almost as though through history, and I know the mind delves somewhat. Sometimes I rush upstairs, go into the room, and I have no idea why I've gone in there. But it's only 4 years ago that the profligacy of the banks and the money and the craziness has led to these austerities that we're in. Why are we not still saying it's a crisis, not of our making? We will not pay the price. Why are people dreading April the 1st with even more cuts? It's not our crisis. Why are we paying a penny piece? And this is why I focus now. When I go on a march, a big TUC march, and I see Unite high-vis vests with not so deep, not so fast, it's not for me. Why is the opposition, or our side, or the TUC or the Labour Party saying or having any truck with a cut at all? And if I'm in the biggest union in the country and potentially the most powerful, I want that to be said in my name, so that we do use and recognise our opportunities and our potential. I want to pick on 2 opportunities that have come and gone. The first one was Vestas on the Isle of Wight some 3 or 4 summers ago. Now Vestas, to remind you, I see some nodding. Vestas produced wind turbine blades. Profitable on the Isle of Wight. One of the biggest employers, 600 people. The factory was given handouts from our own pockets as taxpayers to build it. And it was the green energies which I believe will save the planet, not the 1,000 years of nuclear waste of Fukushima or some seepage here and there. Invest 1 minute, that's what employers say. Pull the rug the next. Now this factory of 600 was non-union. It did have 14 union members. 14 were Unite members. And it was occupied. Occupied. What a marvellous thing. These people who produced these things said it's profitable, we're making them, we can see these things, we're not going to let you get away with it. And they occupied. And it was popular. Popular. Popular with the people on the Isle of Wight who knew that the spin-off effect of one job, by the way, is secondary action. A job generally goes with a family or friends. It has a knock-on effect. So they occupied. It was popular. It was actually, the eyes of the world was on it. People travelled to the Isle of Wight. I went to the Isle of Wight. It was called Solidarity. That's what we did. You started with a minute's silence, and I thought how fabulous that was. That's a tradition. That's a history. I don't know what you thought about during that minute, but these are the things that I thought about. The traditions that you started with. And that got me to Vestas in the Solidarity. But the occupation, though the eyes of the world was on it, and included 14 Unite members that were in the 600, was illegal. And if you stay within the law, no matter what, we didn't go anywhere near Vestas. In fact, the other candidate in this election was on his way in the car, but was told, if we go in some way, we legitimise it. If we legitimise it, we could be sequestrated. And we didn't go. The eyes of the world was on us, but we were nowhere to be seen. it went down to defeat, sadly. But if we had gone, if the General Secretary had joined that occupation, the eyes of the world would have seen, I believe, that factory would have been saved. You know what I believe? Is it was then under a Labour government. The Environmental Secretary was a much younger Ed Miliband. And Unite were funding them to the hilt, and still are, despite the no blank cheques promise of 2.5 years ago and again repeated now. No, they're not blank. We write millions of pounds on these cheques all the while. But I think if the General Secretary of the biggest union in the country had gone down there and joined the occupation, then it would have been a decision of right over wrong. Not whether it was legal or not. It would have been so popular, and if we'd have kept our money in clenched fist, do you know what I believe? Labour would have taken that into public ownership. They had done so with the East Coast Line, the rail network, where National Express reneged on their franchise because it wasn't profitable enough. And it's still under public ownership, but it's not trumpeted. And I think had we done the right thing, it would have stayed open. The 600 would have joined Unite, probably 6,000 on the Isle of Wight, and probably 60,000 or 100,000 or more across the country. Because when leaders lead by example and inspire a confidence, things happen. People notice. People get confidence themselves. But it didn't. We didn't. And it closed. And the second opportunity, in my view, was the Olympics project. The Olympics, which was won, the bid was won under Labour and then finished, completed under the Tories. The Olympics was a golden opportunity for us. And I believe that if you were a negotiator, you negotiate in life, don't you? Whether it's knocking £5 off something you like in a shop, or whether it's in your workplace to defend a pension or a term and condition, we all negotiate. Imagine yourself being the negotiator on the Olympics project, which can overrun financially, but it can't overrun with a date. It has a deadline. What would you have demanded? The best safety footwear or the best hard hat? Well, you might have done, but you would have included that the first 3,200 jobs go to the illegally blacklisted construction workers, wouldn't you? And what would the other side have said? No. Well, then it doesn't get built, and the eyes of the world is on it. These are opportunities to be recognised, seized and maximised. And I actually think we could have broke the back of the anti-trade union laws with the Olympic project. I really believe that. What it would have been called is employment legislation would have been. They wouldn't have said they'd have repealed anti-union laws, but we could have. But it came and it went. And actually, in my view, the worst example of all those was the Paralympics, which followed. Because running in tandem was the closure of Remploy offices around the country. Can you imagine anything so vile to trumpet the brilliance that it was of the Olympic project itself, the site, and the Paralympics, and simultaneously throw in disabled workers from Remploy offices onto the scrap heap? Had we had demonstrated during that time, had we had called for solidarity action on the basis of right over wrong, people, in my view, would have decided to have joined the demonstration, and I think we could have saved those Remploy offices. So I'm going to use my last 30 seconds. Did you say I got 15 minutes more? My last 30 seconds to say that this election should not be happening. It should just not be happening. In the grip of the crisis, with the cuts raining down on us, all our resources in the biggest union in the country, potentially the most powerful, should have been directed in resisting those cuts and insisting to Labour, with our money in clenched fist, that you will proclaim that you'll reverse these decisions or you don't get one penny piece. That's what we should have done. But we brought the election forward to avoid the clash of 2015. And in my view, that is tantamount to a crime. It is a crime for this reason. As negotiators, as the biggest union, the biggest single donator to the Labour Party, we would have had the maximum opportunity as the election got closer to make those demands. And it's been squandered, it's frittered. We have changed our dates to bring it forward. But why not bring it forward a 12-month if you're to avoid the clash? Why not bring it forward to 2 years to avoid the clash? Why 3? Well, I think 3 was to best suit one member of our union above all others. And that's the one that didn't have the courtesy to reply to your emails. It's the other candidate in this election that I can't get to do a hustings, when he has all the arguments, I'm sure, and we've been able to answer all your questions. Who am I? I tell you who I am. I am you. I'm a member of the union and not an official. I'm a member of the union who shares your pain, who shares your experience, who is a person of principle. When offered a job in the union, I turned it down because I believe in elections. I've said that now for the 3rd time rather than appointments, because this is my final point before questions and debate and thrash it all out. If you make the finest of speeches, and Mr. McCluskey can make good speeches, if you proclaim the general strike to warm applause, if you talk of civil disobedience, but the next day or week or month it never comes, the gap then between rhetoric and reality is as wide as the Grand Canyon. And the worst of these things is the other side, the employers. I know who the enemy is. The government and the employers mete out these cuts. But when they look into the eyes and stare into the soul of the person acting and speaking on our behalf, and hear what they say, but see the reverse, they don't believe them anymore. And that's when we're in trouble. Deeper trouble than we are today. And if you wanted an example of that, just listen to Osborne a week ago, when our trumpeters say, not so deep, not so fast, cuts of course, but not so deep, not so fast. And I think in Manchester has been pretty deep and pretty quick, even with the Labour Council. But so unconvinced are the condemns that nobody voted for. Osborne said, faster, deeper, when we lost the AAA. And I thought they were batteries for my Walkman, until I realised what AAA was. Faster, deeper. If our side says the right thing, but doesn't back it up, then we're in deep, deep trouble. Now our opportunity is this election. I think it's wrong, but it's here. I think it was designed to be unopposed. That's why it was dragged forward 3 years. I think that meant that Len McCluskey could stand again, and he was only then 67. This isn't an age thing. He's entitled to stand, but he's not entitled to make all these manoeuvres so it suits him. But it's our opportunity. There's 2 candidates in this election. There's a member of the union who has been on strike, who has occupied, who has put his job on the line for others, called Solidarity over the years. My first strike was in support of the NHS and the nurses. I was a hero then, and we had to decide it. If I did that now, I'd be a criminal, because it's illegal. But I would do the same again, on right over wrong. And our members will make the right choice, providing they open that ballot paper. Providing they do. These are the 2 election addresses. Contrast and compare. Contrast and compare. You can't see them from there. They're comedy props. So that's what my final message is, that we ask all our members to open those ballot papers, because I'm convinced that the time for big change, not to complete the project, if this is the project, not so deep, not so fast, I don't offer less or the same, I offer more. More democracy, more say, more control by members. Leaders lead, yes, but members control. You should decide, not the General Secretary.